The shadow that follows you home. It was a cold, clear evening when Alice decided to take her usual walk home. She lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing out of the ordinary ever seemed to happen. As she stepped outside, the familiar sounds of children laughing and the faint hum of distant cars filled the air. Her steps echoed lightly against the pavement, the sky slowly dimming into a deep blue, though the sun had already dipped below the horizon. She adjusted her scarf, pulling it tighter around her neck, feeling the first bite of the evening chill. Normally, Alice enjoyed her walks. There was something calming about the slow stroll after a long day at work. But tonight, as she walked along the familiar streets, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. There was an odd stillness in the air, an almost oppressive silence that seemed to hang over everything. The houses she passed all appeared dark, their windows reflecting the fading light like empty eyes. She shook her head, dismissing the feeling. It was just her imagination running wild, or maybe the stress of the week catching up with her. As she neared the intersection near the park, she passed a tall, narrow alleyway that ran between two old brick buildings. For a brief moment, she thought she saw something shift in the shadows, just a flicker, like the movement of a figure standing there. Alice paused, squinting into the darkness, but saw nothing. The alley was empty. She took a deep breath and continued walking, trying to ignore the chill creeping down her spine. But as she walked further down the street, something felt wrong. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long, reaching out toward her with every step she took. She could hear the faint sound of footsteps behind her, but when she turned around, there was no one there. The street was as empty as it had been moments ago. A small, uneasy knot twisted in her stomach. She tried to shake it off, blaming her nerves on the darkness. Alice quickened her pace, her shoes clicking faster against the pavement. But the footsteps continued, always just behind her, always in perfect rhythm with her own. Her heart began to race. She glanced over her shoulder once more, and this time, she swore she saw something, a dark shape, tall and thin, standing at the far end of the street, hidden in the shadows. It wasn't quite human, but it looked like a person, or at least it had the shape of one. She stopped, her breath coming in shallow gasps, her mind racing. The figure didn't move, but she could feel its presence, cold and suffocating, like it was waiting for her to do something. A deep dread filled her chest. She couldn't explain it, but she knew deep down that it was following her. It wasn't a figment of her imagination. This shadow, this presence was real. The footsteps behind her, too, weren't just in her head. Something was there, mimicking her every move. A sudden, overwhelming urge to run took over her. Without thinking, Alice broke into a sprint, her heart pounding in her ears. The footsteps behind her grew louder, faster, as if whatever was following her was getting closer with each passing second. She darted past houses, her mind consumed with the terror of being caught. But no matter how fast she ran, no matter how many turns she made, the sound of those footsteps stayed with her, relentless and unyielding. As she neared her own street, Alice's breath came in ragged bursts, her legs burning from the exertion. Her house was just ahead, the warm lights in the windows a beacon of safety. She could almost taste the relief, the safety of being inside. But as she reached the front door, she stopped dead in her tracks. The footsteps had stopped, but she wasn't alone. The shadow she had seen earlier was there, standing at the edge of her driveway, its form now clearer, taller than any person should be, with long, elongated limbs that seemed to stretch unnaturally. Alice's hands shook as she fumbled for her keys, the cold metal of the door handle slipping in her trembling grasp. She didn't dare look behind her, not now, not when the presence was so close. She finally pushed the door open, slamming it behind her, the sound of the lock clicking into place barely comforting her. She stood in the entryway, her chest heaving, her entire body rigid with fear. But then the silence settled in. There was no sound, no movement. The shadow was gone, at least from her sight. She waited for what felt like hours, but nothing happened. No footsteps, no figure, just the quiet hum of her own breath in the darkened house. The next day, Alice tried to shake off the strange events. She told herself it was just her nerves. Maybe it had been the stress of her long day, but deep down she knew better. The feeling, the shadow, had been real, and it hadn't left her. It was still there, somewhere, lurking just outside her awareness. As she stepped into her car that afternoon, she couldn't help but glance into the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a shape standing behind her in the reflection. But there was nothing. Nothing except for the faintest flicker of something moving just beyond the glass, a shadow that wasn't hers. And then it was gone, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it would follow her home again.